Hello friends and welcome. It's Sarah Liz and I am so excited to share with you two really fun ways to stretch your supplies. I'm using a couple die sets from Trinity here, but ideally these are techniques you can take with you into a lot of your card making. This stuck Santa is one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time. So we are going to start by putting together some of these pieces. I have cut out the chimney from some medium brown cardstock and it debosses the bricks. So I am just taking a mini distress ink cube lightly over the top of that to highlight those raised areas and finish off the chimney. Super quick and easy. I like the mini cube and a felt pad for that, just because I think it does a better job of not getting down onto the bricks themselves. Then we have Santa. So his legs are separate from his jacket and there's a little debossed line like right at the bottom of his belly. So I used a dark red marker. It's my R8 Ohuhu alcohol marker just to emphasize that. And then there's little strips of white to put at the bottom of his pants. And then it's really quick and easy to put his coat together. So there are two large curving strips that go on the coat. The larger one is the white that goes on the bottom, and then the slightly shorter one, like very slightly shorter one, is for his belt, and that's this one. That's going to matter a little bit later, so I wanted to point it out here. For his belt and his shoes, I've cut them out of Trinity Stamps glossy black cardstock. I love using my specialty cardstock for small die cuts, like I'm using a metallic gold foil for his belt. It really speaks to my hoarder ways to both use it and show it off, but not use too much. So I am just getting the lay of the land for my card base. I'm making a mini slim. So this is 6 1/4 by 3 1/2. And the snow at the bottom is part of that die set and it's 3.5 inches wide. So that's kind of how I determined my card size here. I want to be able to turn this into an interactive card, and I want to do it by repurposing the dies I already have. So here I am grabbing the white piece at the bottom of his jacket. That one is slightly bigger. So you want the widest die in the set. Yes, we're using the stuck Santa today, but the idea is any die set, if you want to turn it into something interactive, look for the widest die in the set and see what you can do with it. This mechanism is super simple, super simple. We're just sliding something up and down through a slot. I cut that gray piece to be 2 1/4 inches. A typical gift card is 2 1/8 of an inch. And so originally I thought I was going to have that gray piece and the gift card be sliding through the slot, but we're going to do something that works, I think, even a little bit better. While I was talking about gift cards, I just ink blended a darker blue ink onto my card panel, just on the sides and the top, and then I'm flicking on like a shimmery white watercolor paint, so it's kind of like snow coming down. I'm going to line up this gray piece. Again, it's about 2 1/4 by 4 inches, and I'm using some temporary tape to hold it so that the bottoms of those two are lined up, and then I traced right through the hole, and that will help me assemble things later. I'm trying to figure out how high up my chimney needs to go. So I kind of put my snow on the bottom. I need to make sure the chimney tucks behind the snow, and I also need to make sure it's going to cover that slot. And once I figure that out, I just traced right along the bottom of the chimney so that when I go to put it down later, I'm not guessing. I'm going to begin assembling the rest of my Santa, and I've cut his pants twice and his shoes twice. I did the coat as well, but I don't end up using the second piece. We're going to be pushing and pulling Santa by his feet, so I want to make sure those pieces are really sturdy. So when I'm gluing his shoes to his pants, I actually put them down very slightly lower than I might naturally want to, just to make sure I've got good contact between the shoes and the pant leg. And then I'm going to flip this over and add the second die cut of the pants, just to sandwich those shoes in there. Maybe it's a little extra, but I think it's worth it to make sure that this card can survive my children or my friends' children or whoever I end up giving this to. To put the mechanism together, I'm going to hold that gray piece on the back. I can see the pencil that I traced right through that slot. And then I'm going to slide Santa in there as far as I think he needs to go when he's pulled all the way out of the chimney. and I am lightly drawing on the sides of his coat where that slot is. So then I can glue these two pieces together with the whole thing out of the slot. I'm holding my fingers right along those pencil lines, and I'm only adding glue at the very, very bottom. I am not shellacking him all the way onto that gray piece. Again, I know we're using the Stuck Santa die set, but you can do this with lots of die sets to create a sort of push and pull mechanism. And you can see I kind of pulled it away there. His belt and the bottom of his jacket are not glued to that gray cardstock. I'm adding a little bit of gift wrap tape just over the seam, since that's what's going to be rubbing against that slot, and I don't want to create any catch points. Now I'm sliding the gray cardstock and Santa as far as I can through that hole. Because we used the widest die, I can get him almost all the way through. The only thing that doesn't fit are his feet. And then that little flap at the back of the gray cardstock that we didn't glue to Santa will pop up. Now you can't pull Santa all the way out of the chimney. It creates a stopper for us. Again, you can do this with a lot of die sets that you have. I want to make sure people know to push down on Santa's feet, because we're going to have a fun reveal once he pops down through the chimney. So I have grabbed the Papercrafting Magic stamp set, and I grabbed push and an arrow, because it's not a light up card, right? We're not pushing down into the card. We're pushing him towards the bottom of the card. I am going to stamp the push in red right onto his pants. And actually that red ink is only slightly darker than his pants. I didn't want to create a huge distraction there. But then I will remove that push stamp and I will use a blue ink for the arrow. And it stands out a little more. I think it draws your eye and says, what is this? What am I supposed to do with this? To add the chimney, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. There is snow that goes on the top of it, and that is much easier to add now before we put the chimney on the card. But I woke up thinking about this card, you guys. I can't even. And so I just went ahead and added it. I have some really thin 1mm foam tape at the bottom there. I don't need a lot of lift, just enough that like Santa and his belt aren't gonna catch on the chimney. And because I drew those little pencil lines at the bottom of where the chimney goes, I knew exactly where my foam tape could go. Once I add the chimney, I can add the snow that I cut out of some glitter cardstock right to the top. The snow at the bottom, I'm also going to pop up with a little bit of foam tape. So I'm just holding it to my card and then dropping it down slightly to make some little tick marks with my pencil, so I know how far up to bring that foam tape. This is just a different brand, but it's still 1mm foam tape. It's narrower, so I didn't have to cut it. And then I will add that around the outside. And once I remove the release paper, I'll add a little bit of glue to my foam tape. And then I will also add it to the snowdrift where it's going to overlap the chimney. And then everything's kind of all the same level. And I know it's not going to get crushed in the mail. I sort of picked the whole thing up and I just use my fingers to make sure everything's lined up nicely in the corner. And then we can move on to the second way to stretch your dies. I have a handful of these Simply Sentimental sets from Trinity Stamps. And the thing is, they have lots of matching fonts. So I used the Hope to do the ho ho, but then it's gonna say whoa, like ho ho whoa. And then to create the whoa, you can pull the HA from a bunch of different Simply Sentimental sets. Teacher has it, birthday has it, but I needed a W and I don't have a W. So I'm gonna pull the M from the Simply Sentimental Mary. I have lots of word dies with similar fonts. The Simply Sentimental, you get lots of the same fonts across different sets and you can mix and match. And I forget to do that sometimes, right? You don't always need like a full alpha die set. So I'm adding glue to the back of the ho-ho. And if I don't have like the negative from a word die to use to line up my letters, what I love to do is make them sort of wonky, right? And then it doesn't matter if they're straight. They weren't supposed to be straight. I also think it's really fitting on this card where we have this crazy Santa who's sort of stuck and we're trying to shove him through the chimney. I mean, come on. Okay, so I'm gonna glue those down. Because it's onto glitter cardstock, I've grabbed my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. I find it just grabs better onto slick surfaces. And then I'll tap them off on the back of my hand just to remove any excess glue that might ooze out when I go to set them down on my card. for the whoa, I want that on the gray cardstock, and I want it to look like a bunch of soot coming out of the bottom of the chimney, like into the fireplace or into the house. So I have this teeny tiny blending brush, and I'm using a darker gray ink and just swirling little dots about the size of the brush onto that gray cardstock. It's not fancy. I just made sure the dots overlap a little bit. A lot of it gets covered up by the whoa, but that just gave me sort of an interesting backdrop, a little extra texture on there. Okay, so you can see at first the upside down M just looks like an upside down M. So we're going to perform a little surgery. I am trimming off the top wings, we'll call them, of the M, right? So there goes the wing, and then I'm angling it very slightly, okay? And really I'm checking by pulling the W out a little bit to give it that V shape. And that's how I'm getting this to look like an entirely different letter. Okay, so you can see it here. I flipped it over because I thought the white was easier to see. And then I'm going to add that at the beginning of my whoa. I was panicking. I didn't double check actually to make sure that these 4 letters fit on 2¼ inches, and the card was already mostly put together, but we got lucky. We had to do some wiggling and shifting to make it fit, but it worked out really well. So I am just picking each of these up with my tweezers, and I'm being really careful at the tops of the letters to make sure that there's plenty of glue, and then I'm tapping that off on the back of my hand. I'll press down firmly at the top. I don't want it catching on the card when I go to pull his legs out of the chimney. I thought for a second there, you guys, that he was actually stuck, but no, I just forgot to remove the tape on the back. So now I can add this to my card base. You could use foam tape here, but I like keeping things kind of snug, right? I don't want to run the risk of Santa falling or falling part way through the chimney. I don't think it would happen. That slot is pretty snug, but just in case. So I have 2 pieces of heavyweight white cardstock in a 1/2 inch strip. It's like a 1/2 inch by 6 inches by the time I clip off the top. And that leaves me just enough room for the gray piece of cardstock that's slating, my gift card, and maybe a little bit of Santa coming down through there as well. You don't need much. Plus, this is letting me recycle some scraps that I had. For this top piece, I'm just bringing in another scrap. This will create a little bit of a stopper to make sure that Santa's not going to come too far up out of the card. And I'll just double that up the same way I did the side pieces, and I will add all of these onto the back of this card panel. So when I glue them on, I'm being really careful to make sure I'm not overlapping that little piece of gray cardstock that needs to be able to slide and move freely. I'm also making sure that I'm not smearing glue and accidentally gluing that gray cardstock to my card panel. Once I get all of those pieces put together, I'm going to bring in my card base. It's 6¼ by 7 inches, scored at 3½. And then I'm going to add glue only to those white cardstock pieces, and I'll just sort of hold it in my hand and try to get everything lined up nicely. If you're not super familiar with mini slimline cards, they fit in a 6¾ business envelope. It's a standard envelope size. You can usually get them at the grocery store, and they don't take any extra postage at all. So here I've got Santa pushed down into the chimney, and I'm going to add a gift card. I prefer to add removable adhesive onto the gift card for this so that I don't accidentally end up with that gray cardstock back up in the card and then glued to the card. But here's our final project. So Santa can push down and we get this ho-ho surprise, whoa, and then the gift card down at the bottom. I hope this inspires you to try to look at your supplies differently. Look for ways to create interactive elements from die sets that maybe weren't designed that way. Mix and match your word dies to create new greetings. If you find this helpful, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and I will see you next time.